What would you do if you saw the woman who was once the love of your life in the arms of another man? That's exactly what happened to Miho, one of the most powerful CEOs in South Korea. But what he did next, nobody expected. Subscribe to the channel and comment. What would you do in its place?
What would you do if you saw the person you swore to love forever in someone else's arms? Daniel Carter was what many considered the perfect man. CEO of one of the largest tech companies in South Korea, fortune worth billions, admired everywhere he went. But there was one thing he no longer had. Laura. They had been married for 5 years. 5 intense years filled with achievements, galas, celebrity dinners, private jet travels, and breathtaking social media pictures. To the world, they were the definition of a power couple. But behind the perfect image, there was a void. Laura, a visual arts graduate, had left her career behind to support Daniel's rise to the top. At first, she believed it was a shared dream. But little by little, she realized she had become a mere extra in the movie of his life. Daniel was always absent. Even when physically present, his mind was elsewhere. In meetings, goals, investments, mergers. Did he love Laura? Yes. But in a practical, distant, mechanical way. The breaking point came on a cold winter night in Seoul. Laura waited for Daniel to arrive for a special dinner. It was their wedding anniversary. She had prepared everything with care, remade the dessert 3 times just to get his favorite flavor right. But Daniel never showed up. He texted 4 hours later, saying he was stuck in a video call with investors in Tokyo. Laura cried alone that night. And she decided it would be the last time. The divorce was discreet, but painful. They agreed not to go public, and divided their assets fairly. Daniel signed the papers like it was just another contract. He didn't cry. He didn't argue. He just accepted. But something inside him died that day. Months passed. Daniel buried himself deeper in work. His numbers broke records, his stock soared, but his soul felt hollow. There were no more home dinners, no real smiles, no sweet voice waiting for him at the end of the day. And then, everything changed with a simple envelope. It was an invitation. A charity event for children with cancer. Daniel never turned down these invitations, not out of vanity, but because his younger sister had died of leukemia at 9. He'd supported the foundation for years. But this envelope was different. Laura's name was on the organizing committee. He hesitated. Thought of tearing it up and pretending he hadn't seen it. But curiosity won. How was she? Who was she with? Had she moved on? The night of the event, Daniel arrived late, as usual. He walked in with the flawless posture of a CEO. Tailored suit, Swiss watch, subtle cologne, confident gaze. But inside, his heart was racing. Then he saw her. Laura. More radiant than ever. Navy blue dress that hugged her curves, hair elegantly tied back, soft smile, sparkling eyes. She was talking to a man, unknown but clearly close. They laughed, toasted, looked at each other comfortably. It was like a punch in the stomach. Daniel felt a sudden rage. But not toward Laura. Toward himself. For the first time, he saw what he had truly lost. Not just a wife, but the only person who ever really knew him. The only one who saw the man behind the empire. He turned away, left the ballroom, and went to the rooftop. There, overlooking the city lights, Daniel took a deep breath. On the outside, still the powerful CEO. On the inside, a broken man. And alone with his thoughts, he finally understood something he had never admitted. He still loved Laura. And he would do anything to win her back.
That night stayed engraved in Daniel's mind as a turning point. For the first time, he wasn't the invincible CEO everyone admired, but a broken man facing the loss of the love of his life. His meeting with Laura and her firm response still echoed in his thoughts. He returned home without saying a word to anyone. His bodyguards walked him to the mansion's door, but he didn't even notice. He went straight to his room and locked the door. For the first time in years, Daniel cried. Not silent, discreet tears, but deep, painful sobs of a man finally accepting he had lost. In the following days, Daniel avoided meetings, canceled appointments, and locked himself in his own bubble. His assistants found it odd. They had never seen the boss lose focus. Rumors began to circulate within the company. Was he sick? Had he lost money? But no one could imagine that South Korea's most powerful CEO was fighting a pain not even his empire could heal. He spent hours looking at old photos, videos of trips, and happy moments with Laura. He realized that amid the business rush, he had failed to notice the small signs of the end. Her absences, the silences, the distant looks, it was all there, but he refused to see. And now it was too late. But something began to change. One afternoon, while visiting the children's foundation Laura had started, and which he had funded from the beginning, Daniel saw a drawing on the wall. It was simple, made by a child, but carried a powerful message. True love is the one that takes care. Those words struck Daniel like an arrow to the heart. For the first time in a long while, he felt a genuine desire to be better. Not for status or money, but because he wanted to deserve the love he had lost. That's when he made a decision. He chose to step back from the company for a while. He would leave his vice president in charge and use that time to rediscover who he was before power took over. And perhaps win Laura back, not with promises, but with actions. In the months that followed, Daniel underwent a real transformation. He traded expensive suits for simple clothes, started frequenting the same cafes Laura used to go to, got involved in social projects, started therapy, and most importantly, learned to listen. In one of those therapy sessions, he confessed something he had never told anyone. I never knew how to love. I thought giving comfort and luxury was enough, but I was never truly present. I love with absence. The therapist simply nodded. She knew he was finally understanding. One day, while walking the streets of Seoul, Daniel saw something that left him in shock. Laura was in a cafe, alone, reading a book. He stood on the sidewalk, watching her for a few minutes. She looked peaceful, light, different from the woman he left behind. He wanted to go in, but held himself back. It wasn't the right time yet. That night, Daniel wrote in his journal, something he had started at his therapist's suggestion. Today I saw her. She was glowing, and I was proud, not because she moved on, but because I'm learning to let go. And maybe, just maybe, one day she'll see I changed not for her, but for myself. That thought was freeing. For the first time, Daniel didn't feel pain, but gratitude. Gratitude for what they lived, for what he learned, and for the man he was becoming. But fate still had something in store. A few weeks later, Laura went to the foundation to deliver some donations. She didn't know Daniel would be there that day. When she saw him, she hesitated, but he approached with a sincere smile. "Laura," he said, "it's good to see you." She smiled, a little surprised, but not cold. "You look different, Daniel." "I'm trying." "Not for you. For me." She looked at him closely, searching for signs of the man he used to be, but she didn't find them. And in that moment, she saw something she never expected. Truth. The reunion was brief, but meaningful. As they said goodbye, she placed her hand on his shoulder and said, "I'm glad you're doing well." And she left. Daniel didn't ask for another chance. He didn't insist. He simply smiled and went back to helping the children, because now he understood true love doesn't hold on, it sets free. But what he didn't know is that reunion would change everything. That conversation at the cafe had shaken Daniel in ways he never expected. Laura's serenity, the maturity in her words, the way she smiled even while carrying old wounds, it all broke Daniel from the inside. For the first time, He faced reality. She had changed, and he needed to change too. In the following days, Daniel tried to return to his routine, but his mind wouldn't let him rest. He was still a respected CEO, attending important meetings, making million-dollar decisions, flying internationally, but something inside him weighed heavily. Every time he saw a couple laughing on the street, he remembered Laura. When he found himself alone in his luxury penthouse, he felt the emptiness that money couldn't fill. On a rainy night, Daniel looked at his phone and opened an old photo gallery. Pictures from trips, dinners, simple moments. He saw himself smiling with Laura at a traditional Korean festival, both wearing hanbok, happy like two children. His heart tightened. The next day, he made an unexpected decision. He requested a 2-week leave from the company. It was the first time in years. The board was surprised, but no one dared to question him. Daniel needed to find something he had lost within himself. He decided to visit Laura's hometown, where they had spent their first weekend together as a couple. A simple place, but full of meaning. Upon arrival, he quietly booked a room at a small inn. No bodyguards, no drivers, no suits. Just him, his past, and silence. He walked through the narrow streets, passed by the old restaurant where they had their first bibimbap, and sat on the bench in the square where they kissed under lanterns. A lump formed in his throat. No matter how much he tried to move on, part of him was still stuck there. That afternoon, he sat at a local cafe and ordered the same tea Laura used to order. The waitress, a kind elderly lady, recognized him immediately. "You're Laura's boyfriend, aren't you?" she said with a nostalgic smile. Daniel stayed silent for a few seconds, surprised. "I was," he replied quietly. She nodded kindly. "She used to speak about you with great affection, said you were the kind of man the world needed, but didn't know it yet." Those words echoed in Daniel's mind for the rest of the day. A man the world needed, but didn't know it yet. The next morning, he did something he had never done, visited a local orphanage. Laura had always dreamed of adopting a child, but Daniel used to say it wasn't the right time. Now, he wanted to understand what she saw in it. Upon entering the orphanage, a young volunteer welcomed him and explained how everything worked. The children were playing in a room, and when they saw Daniel, they ran toward him with curiosity. Some hugged him, others pulled his hand. And in that moment, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: human connection. He spent hours with them, painting, playing, listening to stories. A little girl named Minji, just 6 years old, became very attached to him. She had the same eyes as Laura. When Daniel asked what she wanted to be when she grew up, she replied, "I want to be someone who makes people smile, like my mom wanted to be." Daniel held back his tears. In the following days, he returned to the orphanage every day. With each passing day, something inside him rebuilt itself. He began to question everything he had done so far. Had it been worth sacrificing love for ambition? Was it too late to start over? At the end of the second week, before return to Seoul, Daniel left a generous donation to the orphanage, but asked for his name to remain anonymous. It was no longer about image. It was about purpose. On the way back, Daniel looked out the car window and, for the first time in years, genuinely smiled. Not the forced smile of meetings, nor the polite smile for interviews. It was a light smile from someone who had found a missing part of himself. But fate still had surprises in store. When he arrived home, he received an unexpected message. It was from Laura. "Can we talk?" Honor still echoed in Daniel Carter's chest. He had seen Laura in someone else's arms, laughing, carefree, happy, and it destroyed him inside. But not in the way he expected. It wasn't anger. It was a deep emptiness, a regret that hurt more than any business failure. In the days that followed the event, Daniel locked himself in his luxurious penthouse at the top of Seoul. The skyline seemed to mock his loneliness. Sitting in front of the glass wall, he looked out at the city he had helped shape with his investments and ideas, but now it only reminded him of what he had lost. Laura's words that night wouldn't leave his mind. "I had to save myself from you, Daniel. You were pushing me into an abyss without even realizing it." It was like a mirror. For the first time, he saw himself as the villain of the story. Daniel was a man who always had everything, raised to win, to never show weakness. In a home where emotions were seen as distractions, he learned to hide his feelings behind contracts, goals, and numbers. But now, the contracts brought no comfort, the goals brought no peace, and the numbers were too cold to warm a shattered heart. One day, without warning, he did something unthinkable. He returned to the old house where he had lived with Laura before the divorce. The house was empty, rented to foreigners, but the walls still held echoes of laughter, arguments, and promises. In the master bedroom, he found an old picture frame hidden deep in the closet. It was a photo of them in Jeju on one of the few trips where he had actually put his phone away. That night, Daniel cried, and in that cry, he began to change. At the company, employees noticed the difference. The strict, impersonal CEO now spent more time talking to teams, remembered birthdays, listened to ideas, even laughed in some meetings. But not everyone believed the change was real. "He's just trying to forget his ex," they whispered in the hallways. "It won't last. It's just a phase." But it wasn't. For the first time, Daniel was trying to be a better person, not for status, but because he was tired of being cold and distant. And in that spirit of change, he decided to do something even harder: meet Laura's new man. Through mutual contacts, he learned his name, Miho Kang, a renowned architect known for his sustainable and humane work. Young, charismatic, with an easy smile, and completely different from Daniel. At a design expo in Gangnam, Daniel saw his chance. Miho was among the exhibitors, and Daniel approached him with firm steps, but a racing heart. "Mr. Kang?" he said, extending his hand. Miho turned surprised but polite. "Yes, that's me. And you are—" "Daniel Carter." The silence between them lasted only 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. "Ah, I see," Miho replied, understanding. "It's a pleasure to meet you. The pleasure is mine. And don't worry, I didn't come to cause trouble." They talked for a long time. Miho, with his calm demeanor, impressed Daniel. There was no hostility, no confrontation. Just two men who, in some way, cared about the same woman. At the end of the conversation, Daniel was direct. "Take care of her." Miho smiled sincerely. "Always." Daniel left that event with a lighter heart. For the first time, he felt truly ready to move on. That night, when he arrived home, he found a letter on his desk. It was from Laura. She had received the letter he left weeks earlier, and responded with something he never expected. "Daniel, I don't know if what we have is reconciliation, friendship, or just a well-written chapter that needed a worthy ending. But I read your letter. I cried, and for the first time in a long time, I was able to remember you without pain. Time doesn't go back, but maturity teaches us that some pains shape us. You taught me a lot, and I taught you too. Maybe we're no longer us, but I hope you find someone who sees you with the same eyes I once did." Fondly, Laura. Daniel read those words with a melancholic smile. She had moved on, and now maybe he could too, but fate still held one last move. Something neither Laura nor Miho nor Daniel could ever expect. Time passed, and with it, the wounds began to heal. The Daniel who was once ruled by pride and a need to win at all costs was now a different man. That cold CEO, focused only on numbers, had learned to look within himself. He had realized that true success wasn't just about building empires, but about rebuilding homes, starting over with a clean heart. Laura, in turn, had also matured. After reuniting with Daniel, she spent weeks reflecting on everything they had lived through. The conversation they had deeply moved her. In his eyes, she saw a man who was remorseful but also determined to change. The two went their separate ways for a while. Laura focused on her career in art, began exhibiting her work, and was recognized for her authenticity and emotion. Daniel, on the other hand, reduced his workload, traveled less, and spent more time with his family, especially his younger sister, who had always been his anchor. One day, Daniel made a decision that would change his life forever. He decided to adopt a child. He wanted to give someone the chance to have a loving home. That's how he met Hannah, a shy 5-year-old Korean girl with deep, quiet eyes. At their first meeting, she said nothing, just looked at him and held his hand tightly. Daniel cried. It was as if that touch said, "Please, don't leave me." Months later, with all the paperwork done and the adoption finalized, Daniel brought Hannah home. The once cold and quiet mansion now echoed with laughter, toys scattered across the floor, and the smell of fresh cake in the late afternoon. But despite the joy of fatherhood, something still troubled him, the emptiness left by Laura. So, on a rainy afternoon, he invited her for coffee at his house. She arrived with a red umbrella, smiling gently. Hannah, curious, ran to the door and hugged Laura instinctively. In that moment, everything changed. They talked for hours. They laughed, cried, remembered the past, and imagined the future. Daniel finally opened his heart completely. He said he didn't want to go back to who they were before, but wanted to build something new, based on what they had learned. Laura held his hand. "I never stopped loving you. I just learned to love myself too." Daniel smiled, eyes brimming with tears. That night, everything changed. Months later, Laura was pregnant. Hannah jumped with joy, saying she would have a little brother. The house was now full of color and life, and a warmth that no amount of money could buy. And then on a sunny morning, with Hannah playing on the living room floor and Laura holding her growing belly, Daniel looked at his new family and got emotional. That was real success. Not the company's stocks, not the $1 million deals. That, love, forgiveness, a new beginning. Their past had been painful, but it served as a bridge to something greater. Today, they were more than a reconciled couple. They were a family. And now I ask you, what would you do if you saw the love of your life in someone else's arms? If you've made it this far, tell me, were you also moved by this story? Sparkles don't leave without liking this video, because I know many people watch but forget to support the channel. Your like, comment, and subscription help us keep bringing heartfelt love stories. Speech Balloon Red Heart. And if you like this one, don't go just yet. Watch these other stories right here. You'll fall in love even more. See you next time.